Monster Rancher 2. A beloved game by many as a monster training game, yet an underrated classic compared to the same genre such as Pokemon, Digimon, or even Monster Racer in Japan. As one of my favorite childhood games, I wanted to revisit this good old classic game that I felt really underappreciated over the past years. As the game is seen more of a gimmick in CD summoning of monsters for some people, the truth is actually more than that. This is K1PM, and this time I'll be doing a full review of Monster Rancher 2. Gonna talk about more about the game and comparing it to the other Monster Trainer game of its time. Monster Rancher 2 is a unique monster trainer game, kinda like Pokemon or Digimon, but instead it relies heavily on the training and bonding of a monster one at a time. And also a lot more tournament battles, more intense errantry training, expedition on different biomes, scolding monsters for cheating, and a lot more things that you don't usually see in these kinds of games. As each monster has its own set of possible personality traits, likes and dislikes, the player has to adjust a bit towards each of the monsters, especially when that monster is a damn Suezo. I had a lot of times where Suezo ends up failing several other trainings due to him slacking off. Or at worst, Suezo ends up cheating some of the trainings I've tasked him to do. Like, really Suezo? I kept on scolding him and he keeps on doing it from time to time. Although Suezo did ends up changing and learning later on how cheating is a bad thing to pull off, especially in front of me. But sometimes he does ask for a treat when doing some of the tasks. While some of the monsters are more likely to ask for a play with the player, it's a bit of a fun bonding time with a monster, which is kinda refreshing in a way. As well as you can see how they train themselves within different training courses. The higher the stats of a monster currently has, the higher the intensity of a training course the monster has to go through. That's one of the main things that I really love about the game. How monsters are able to adapt and change themselves, depending on how the player teaches them. In other monster trainer games, it's more of a straightforward kind of thing. You catch him, you train him, and you win through countless matches. Which isn't bad in a way. It's just Monster Rancher 2 does things rather different, into a more realistic kind of way. Whether you'll be that caring and soft trainer who forgives a lot of their monsters' failures and spoiling it a lot too much, a fair trainer who trains monsters fairly, giving them proper nutrients and being able to maintain their relationship really well, or be that harsh trainer who keeps on pushing its monsters to its edge with a bunch of intense training and months of supply on its hated food, like potatoes and such. Well, some monsters like them, but not everyone though. Until it runs away for weeks and possibly months. Or even get your monster hospitalized after getting beaten up badly in a tournament, or having a possible injury from errantry trainings. Yes, I've experienced this a lot of times when I was a kid back then. Little old me isn't exactly an actual good trainer, despite already played a bunch of Pokemon and Digimon games before. If you've played Monster Rancher games, you know what happens next. This is just horrifying to watch, especially to those who've played the game back then. Nobody would be happy seeing their monster that a player raised for so long would end up passing away in the end. It even blew my mind that it's possible for a game like this to even exist, especially when this game is catered for a younger audience. Like, why developers? Why do you put this? I mean, it's good for the game to have it, but in a way it's kinda like giving mini PTSD for the kids. And I'm one of them before, and I still remember it even until now. I've played a lot of different other Monster Trainer games before, including some other Monster Trainer games that are exclusive in Japan. But Monster Rancher 2 takes it really this far. I'm amazed how the developers Tecmo have done it really well. Well, to be fair, Tamagotchi has that kind of scene too. But it's not as intense how Monster Rancher 2 does it, that it leaves a long-lasting impression of the game. The same thing goes with Digimon World 1. Despite being a part of my childhood, it kinda kills off that sorrowful kind of feel to it. In a way, revival of a Digimon takes place after the death of it. At the very least, the game still has a workaround regarding about this matter. Before the monster ends up passing away, Colt here, the monster assistant, warns you about the monster's aging. By that time, it would be best to cryogenically freeze them at the lab within the town, in order to make use of them later on, which I'll be explaining about it soon after. When it comes to the battling of monsters, Monster Rancher 2 makes it a bit different. It's not the same as how the others does it, with their random encounter battles within different places and a few specific fights here and there. Monster Rancher 2 is more of an intense competition battle, where a lot of different monsters fights off within an arena. All of them have their own set of stats and unique features when you battle them, and some of them aren't that easy to fight against. You'll encounter against these guys that would possibly be a nightmare for you, even against larger and tougher opponents that could seemingly squish your monster easily. You train your monster just enough against different opponents on different arena rankings, and at times even on special arena battles. The usual competition settles in two ways. It's either this one with the ladder system, a standard kind of thing, or this one, which I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but it's a damn great idea to have. Because of this kind of rule, the player is able to fight off against every monster in the arena available. There's no other way to avoid matches with them, unless if the enemy forfeited battle against the player. The same thing goes with the player, of course. Now, the battle itself doesn't have a usual turn-based kind of system, but it's rather unique in a way. A set amount of moves are available to use, depending on the position of the monster and the number of techniques currently have. Whether it'll be long-range attacks like these, or short ones such as these. And when both monsters are near, either of them can push the other. And in rare cases, when special conditions are met, monsters are able to trigger events such as these. More of an adrenaline kind of boost that could change the battle, while having a guts meter below acting as the stamina meter for the monsters. There's attacks of a monster that focuses on the guts of a monster instead of the life points. At the same time, it also increases the hit chance of a monster's attack, making some of the fights a bit tricky in a way. Although sometimes that foolery thing might occur in battle. In a way, it cancels out the last move you pick, which can be really annoying to be honest. While it'll leave your monster open, giving the enemy a higher hit chance of attack. As foolery occurs based on the loyalty of the monster, I think, you'll be getting this a lot of times during the developing stage of a monster. Though to be fair, this also happens towards the enemy, so it's a bit alright I guess in the end. But it can be frustrating too at times, especially when my monster ends up fainting because of it. It's quite interesting they have this kind of unique battle system that's far from the rest of the other games I know, that heavily involves on the positioning of a monster to be able to pull off certain attacks. Well, there's other games are kinda like that, but it's years after the PS1. Not to mention how some of the monsters' moves looks quite good, although some of them are kinda bad to be fair. Like these ones, which I kinda don't get it, but the others looks amazing. I end up wanting to try and collect the other monsters after seeing them in battle, especially those unique ones that I rarely see them in battle. Anyway, aside from that, when it comes to getting your very own monster in the game, there are 3 ways you could do it. The first one is at the marketplace in town. You could get seasonal kind of monsters in there, although it's rather too limited in my opinion. Having only a few selections available, I wish they could have at least expanded this further, rather than having only a few limited options on it. The second one is through means of using distones, as in any of the CDs laying around your house could be used as summoning monsters. Even CDs that aren't PS1. Well, not every CD works, unfortunately, but there's a lot of possible discs you could use. Although there's a limit on the kind of monsters you could get, depending on the player's current ranking and other different factors. meaning it'll take a while in order to get different types of monsters in the game, which is fine and all, as there's that sense of goal on ranking in the game. But it kinda ruins the mood because of it. That feeling of searching for every CD in your house to get that possible amazing monster that in the end you still can't get it is a bit of a downside in my opinion. Although there's those specific monsters that you could only get through specific CDs. Like when using PS1 Metal Gear Solid Disc, you'll end up getting Gabu Soldier as a special kind of monster. The third one is through means of combining different monsters that a player has already frozen before. Mixing up some monsters would create different varieties of sub-breeds of different monsters. In a way, it's kinda like how dog breeding works, but instead, combining different monsters into one being. I know, it kinda sounds horrifying when you think about it. Aside from that, when combining two monsters, a player could add an extra stuff into the mix to improve the stats of the monsters, or possibly get a rare monster by adding specific ingredients that could be acquired within expeditions on different places or through other different means. No other monster trainer game of its time I know does the same thing. Well, except for that one game that I mentioned before, Monster Racer. But they don't have sub-breeds of monsters, that's the difference at least. When trying to get a monster's ability or techniques, the only way possible is through sending them off to do errantry, where monsters would face 4 trivial tasks depending on the selected biome, while having the chance of encountering any of the wanted monsters listed here. This is one of the great things within the game, watching my monsters struggle on their own, facing against different odds to overcome. It looks encouraging how sometimes they are able to pull it off. Just make sure to let them be prepared first before sending them off. But getting skills within errantry requires a bit of chance and amount of stats needed. And in other special techniques, specific requirements are needed to pull off. There's 2 kinds of requirements. The first one would be the nature of a monster, whether it be good or evil, which can be troublesome to pull off, especially when you're trying to aim for an evil alignment. Now the second one is the harder part. You have to force your monster to pull off a set of specific attacks in order to get the other techniques. This can be a bit of a hustle, especially when trying to pull it off during a tournament match. The player is restricted to do that specific move all the time, despite its inconvenience in a match. I hated this kind of idea, especially without knowing about it until I ended up searching for a guide online before. How would a player expect this kind of possible thing to do first, without having to look a guide online? Sure, a player could do a trial and error kind of thing in order to possibly get that move, right? But it's not like the monster could live forever, right? You know, this kind of idea would be fine if at least there's a proper guide to talk about it, especially when there's one nearby. Right, Colt? I know that Monster Rancher 2 tries to be a bit different, towards a bit realistic kind of things. But they kinda a bit went too far in my opinion, that it became a bit too complicated for some people. Some of my friends even admit it when they gave up playing Monster Rancher 2, in favor of a more simpler kind of setup like Pokemon. The same thing goes with Digimon World 1 unfortunately. I believe this is one of the major factors why Monster Rancher 2 became just a thing in the past, sadly. The game isn't exactly for everyone despite how good the game is. Expedition. This would make the game a bit refreshing aside from the whole competitive arena setup. Explore through 3 different biomes with several other different ruins to discover, and send your monster to look for treasures within those places. A player could discover different ruins and get a bunch of useless stuffs, or discover hidden items that can only be found within specific ruins. When you've played the game back then without any internet or sources that much online, you'll keep on loading the game until you find the good stuffs. Especially since this happens annually on a specific biome. It's a bit frustrating. In a way, trying to get that specific item like the Golden Peach or Joker's Mask ends up being a chance of not spawning at all in a specific ruin, despite I've already met every requirement of it possible. I had to load the game all over again, cause of that damn RNG spawning mechanic on the items they added. There should be at least a fine line of a game towards a realistic kind of approach and the conveniency of a game. Other than that, the expedition relies heavily on the stats of the monsters. Life, to increase the amount of actions could be done, power, to remove the objects that are blocking on the way, and int, to open hidden paths and find different treasures within different ruins. There's also skill, but that's only for one specific item that could be get, and that's the Joker Mask. This is a nice addition within the game that could influence the player's objective on training of a monster, and also an improvement on what they did before compared to Monster Rancher's one problem of getting lost within ruins. One of the things that I find interesting in the game is how adaptive the dialogues and the series of events can be. Not only does it have that progression with my monster and my current trainer rank, but how the NPC changes throughout my progression. As well as there are quite a lot of events that happens in the game, depending on the current monster I choose and the progression in the game. Such as if I got a certain amount of money, I'd be able to upgrade my house and the barn itself, gaining more inventory spaces for me to carry items, as well as gaining access towards bigger monsters for me to take care of, as well as my monster's grave into a more respectable one. And during a birthday of a monster, there's a small cute celebration for them. Colt here would end up singing a happy birthday song to them. You could see how the text lyrics changes depending on the monster's age and progression. It's actually quite nice to see this. But what surprises me the most is this one. I never expected that one test I've made at the start would end up being true. Who knew they'll end up putting aliens in the game as a form of a monster? Kinda reminds me of Silent Hill all over again with their UFO ending. And you know what? I love it actually. Now when it comes to the graphics of the game, it's actually alright. It improved quite a lot compared to their first game. I love how they designed the game greatly, especially for the 3D game on the PS1. The level design within each places looks really good, from the well-designed towns and different tournament stages to the game's monster ranch, training course, and even different biomes around the map. As well as how well they design each of the monsters look. Having their very own unique portrait even as a subbreed makes each of the monsters really look unique. Unlike before, they kinda look a bit too off. It genuinely has that unique sense of subbreeds of a monster can be, that it feels like it's more than just a retexture of a monster. You know, I love listening to soundtracks within games that I've played before. Whether it'll be games from the older consoles, like SNES games, PlayStations, Game Boys, or even Nintendo DS, or towards more modern games like Payday 2, Tropico 4, or even Total War Shogun 2. Now Monster Rancher 2 on the other hand does it absolutely amazing. One of the underappreciated parts within the game is its amazing, remarkable soundtrack to listen on. It has this wider range of music available that complements the game really well, especially when tournament matches against different opponents. I absolutely love the intensity and tension of every battle music and fanfare they made there. Now the sound effects on the other hand, it's alright. It's nothing that spectacular in my opinion. It's just some good old fitting sound effects placed there. That's why I give this game a rating of 8.7 out of 10. Out of all the Monster Trainer games, Monster Rancher 2 remains to be one of the most beloved games I've ever played. During its time, Monster Rancher 2 seemed to be the most efforted developed Monster Trainer game compared to the first and second Pokemon games and Digimon World 1. But unfortunately, the game isn't exactly for most people, considering the game is a bit complicated compared to the other games of its time. Not in a way that the game is hard to play, but rather it's kinda hard to understand. For some people that is, especially to those who haven't played the game yet, or any of the Monster Rancher games. Then again, the game is without a doubt one of the most unique games I've ever played. Not by just basing on the CD gimmick, despite how amazing that idea can be, but as an enjoyable monster training game that heavily bonds with the player, explore through different places, and fight off against different monsters at the arena. Truly, Monster Rancher 2 deserves to be praised as one of the game's history's unique developed games in the past. The developers of Monster Rancher 2, Tecmo, have done an absolutely great job in creating this gem. So, what do you think about the video I made? Be sure to leave a like or comment down below to help my growing channel out. And subscribe to stick around my channel for more game reviews such as these. I know it's a bit cliche of what I say, but it really helps me out morally, to be honest. This is K1PM, and I bid you farewell.